Right, thanks very much for having me. I'm basically just going to try and talk a little bit about things from an editorial perspective. I used to be a scientific researcher like all of you guys here, and I know that the point between submitting your manuscript to a journal and the eventual outcome of either being accepted or rejected, there's a black box in between, right? And this is full of intrigue and confusion and witchcraft, and it shouldn't be that way. You know, you guys should know what's going on. So hopefully I'm going to dispel a few myths about publishing and talk about what we do in Nature and also what we're looking for in submissions, which I know is basically what you guys want to know about. So Nature's been going quite a long time now. It's 150 years old this year. The look has changed a fair bit, but we don't have statements from Goethe anymore, but the mission is pretty much the same. We are interested in disseminating knowledge to the general public and also helping scientists understand what's going on outside their fields. And I think the only real difference is that we've really switched these two around. So our emphasis now, because of our readership of core scientists, we think about them and serving them first. The role of scientific journals, I think, is a topic that's been debated more and more in recent years. And there are many different roles of journals, but I think primarily Nature is like any other one, which is we impart some kind of selection process, typically because of what our readership is, but also every journal is imparting some kind of assessment on the novelty and the impact of those findings. We of course validate research as well through peer review, but also by standards that the journal sets itself in terms of reporting and reproducibility. And especially in today's era when we have social media and many other things that are competing for our attention, and we publish a lot of papers. Okay, last year we published something like 2.5 million papers in the natural sciences, and each one of you is going to probably read a few hundred, right? So this means that dissemination and amplification of your results becomes ever more important. So Nature's like any other journal, but we're slightly different than we have a magazine as well. So as well as our journal component, we also have the front half of the magazine, which is run by journalists and editors, and they put together comment pieces, thought pieces, news, features that we think are of interest to scientists. And we're separated by them with the back half, where we publish the primary research, reviews, perspectives, this kind of thing. And these two parts are editorially independent. I've been speaking to people at this conference, and this seems to be something that people aren't as aware of as I thought. So this means that we do not influence what the journalists write about, and likewise they can criticise us as a journal as much as they like. And this is how it has to be, because it means that we have freedom to publish and they have freedom to write about what they want. In the back half, we have just over 30 editors. I'm the half in both of those columns because I straddle chemistry and biology. And everyone has a PhD there. Everyone has postdoctoral industrial experience. We even have some people who still have part-time academic positions. And of course, our primary role is to select what research we publish. So the first thing that we do is we decide what's going to be sent out for peer review. And on a scale between sending nothing out to peer review, which is basically not a viable model, and sending everything out to peer review, which maybe even a few years ago would have been thought of as a ludicrous idea, but these days, especially with fair data initiatives and things like this, actually publishing negative results, this is actually an interesting space to be thinking about. And between these two extremes, there's some kind of subjective assessment about how important the work is, how novel it is, how significant the work is. And obviously, as the burden, as we send more and more things out to peer review, this places more and more burden on academic referees, and of course, this is inversely proportional to the number of emails that I get telling me that I'm an idiot and don't know what I'm talking about. So Nature sits about here. We're quite selective. We have well over 10,000 submissions a year these days, and of those we send out 15 to 20%. So already we've taken out the majority of what we get sent, and then of those we then publish about 17 or 18 papers a week, and that works out as about 7 or 8% of everything we get submitted. Yeah. So what this means is that unfortunately we are rejecting 93% of what is being sent. And that's sort of demoralising as a scientist, right? You know, you like science, you're interested in science, but you have to turn a lot of it away. And really, the thing I would say is that we still read and understand, or try to understand, the other 93%, and we're still interested in it. And so we want everyone else in the journal, other people who read our journal, to know why we're interested in developments in our field. So what we do is, as well as publishing research, we also commission pieces about things that are happening in our areas that are interesting. We write pieces for the magazine as the voice of nature. This is a community effort. And obviously we ask people to, in our field, to say what's exciting to you about what's going on in your field at the moment, structural biology, chemical biology, whatever it is. And part of this is coming to this sort of thing. We come and talk to you guys at conferences, talk to you about publishing. We do lab visits. I've been doing them with Ming Wei this week. And we talk about other standards that are in the field. And the reason for doing all this is to get out and meet you guys, but also if there's something really interesting that's happening, we want to know about it first so we can make sure that our readers know about that development first as well. So this is maybe an approximation of the editorial process as I've described it so far. Unfortunately, the reality is somewhat more anodyne. So when a manuscript comes in, it gets assigned to the editor. In that case, this is me. And this is obviously, like I said, this is the key process here where we either reject the paper or we send it out to review. And we send it out to 2 to 4 reviewers, sometimes more. This is probably the most important functional role that I play, is making sure that we select reviewers who cover the entirety of the technical background and the fundamental science that's being reported in the work, so we have an understanding of the science and its implications for different fields. Usually it then comes back to us and we have probably 2 rounds of peer review on average, and ultimately everyone wants to get to the point of the blue arrow of acceptance, right? Obviously it doesn't always work out that way, and a lot of people think that when you get rejected from Nature, that's it, we don't accept appeals, but this isn't the case. Okay, so the problem is that many people are focused in their appeal about arguments that are not to do with their science. So the reviewers are stupid, you're an idiot, that referee doesn't know what they're talking about. Professor X, who is in my field and has won a Nobel Prize, thinks my work is really exciting, why don't you? These are all fine points to make, and I'm very happy for you, but this is not changing our editorial decision. However, if you come to us and you say, we understand why you've rejected our paper, and we are interested in addressing those limitations, and we agree with you about those limitations, and here's how we're going to do it, that is the sort of thing that we are going to take very seriously, and I've published many papers that effectively follow that remit, especially after review, because after review we have a clear idea about what the people in the field want to see from that work. Okay? And often we'll reject a paper after review because what the reviewers are asking for, we feel, is too much to put into a single paper, because it's unreasonable sometimes to ask people to just go to the ends of the earth to publish a paper anywhere. However, I understand that it's not the end all, so that, you know, many people are working things in their lab at the same time and say, actually, we have data on that and we can do those experiments, no problem. In that case, please come back to us. We can arrange to at least send it back to the reviewers if not publish the work. So like I said, the first step in the process is the most important, and we use all of the tools available to us to assess the work. We look at the manuscript itself, all of the supporting data, relevant literature, PubMed, whatever it is. And we also, importantly, consult with our editorial colleagues, because a lot of people think that when a manuscript comes to a journal like Nature, it's seen by one person, it's the person you get your decision letter from, and that's it, and that's not the case. Science is becoming ever more multidisciplinary, and so many papers will be seen by myself. Let's say if it's a chemistry paper, it might be seen by a microbiology editor, by an immunology editor. Most papers, I would say, are seen by at least 2 or 3 editors, if not more. I think one thing that people don't really always take full advantage of is the cover letter. This is your chance to tell me why you're excited about your work, why I should be excited about your work, in a format you can't do in the paper. tell me what is the headline result in your work, why it's changing the field. Don't tell me it's a holy grail, don't tell me it's a paradigm shift, but tell me scientifically why it is changing people's perspectives on how they do research, or fundamentally, practically changing the way in which they do their research. Obviously, like I said, the paper then comes back for review, and I think the key difference here between Nature and many other journals is that we don't count votes. It's not a democracy, the editor has the final decision on the paper. And so what this means is we weigh up all of the different points of view from the people in their fields, and we try to come to a decision about, does that reinforce editorial assessment of the work? Does it change that? Does it undermine what we thought was interesting about the work based on their technical knowledge, okay? And the thing is, one thing I should really note here is we never ask people, should this be published in Nature? Okay, that's not a question we ask. Many people tell us this should or shouldn't be published in Nature, but we don't ask that question. We ask, is this changing the way you're doing the research? Is this important to you? Does this have relevance outside of what you're doing? So, we're looking for impact, of course. This word has a lot of connotations, especially with the word factor put after it. So I think better summed up is that you want to read a piece of research and go, wow, I did not expect that. Okay? That's quite a lofty ambition for every paper we publish. So probably more reasonably is, hey, that's really clever, or that's really useful to me, that's going to change how I'm going to do what I do. Okay? So I think the best way of summing this up is that we're looking for a substantial advance, but in a specific direction. Okay? This means that we don't want you to make lots of little advances in an area of a field, or a subfield. What we want you to do is advance that field in a specific way that's enabling to other researchers, or is interesting to other researchers. Okay? We want compelling and complete stories. This doesn't mean that you have to answer every question in the field, because we know that the best research is actually starting conversations, not ending them. But what it does mean is, if you write in your introduction, we're going to tell you about this fascinating phenomenon, and then you don't explain how, what's going on, that's going to be problematic. Okay? Normally these things take one of two routes. They are either insight into something fundamentally new, or they are practically useful, so they are doing something new. Of course, at Nature we talk a lot about broad interest. This means that it should have relevance outside the field. Sometimes, and relatively frequently, we have papers that are just so interesting and so specialised that they're just so cool in that field that we still want to publish it. You don't have to have broad remit, but of course, when we say that, we're not talking about every single scientist understanding everything that we publish. But what we are talking about is, if placed in context, if people are reading the abstract of the paper, which we work as editors hard to make sure it's readable and intelligible, these people are going to read the journal and say, that is really interesting. Okay? Obviously, everything has to be technically solid. That's the same for any other journal. So here are a few examples that we've published very recently. So this first one here, I think brewing cannabinoids is a pretty interesting idea. I think you could say that metabolic engineering, that paper is maybe not the most interesting thing about it, but this fills a really interesting gap between limitations of what you can do with chemical synthesis and what you can do in isolation of natural products. Okay, and in an area that is incredibly therapeutically interesting and is developing rapidly. The second one here just came out this week, and essentially these people have found that you can make biology do alkyne synthesis. So you're making alkynes from amino acids. That's really interesting because you can now do quick chemistry using biology, and you can start to think about applications of that. And the nice thing about this work is they don't just report the biosynthesis pathway, they go towards doing this. They do some quick chemistry, they show that you can use this for proteomic labeling. That's a really interesting way of going about things. The third one is a Class C G protein coupled receptor. We've got a session going on at the moment talking about this kind of thing. And this is really interesting. It's essentially our first look into these full-length receptors, some insights into perhaps how they're activated, but really it's about understanding these different classes of GPCRs that are dimeric, so signaling a very different way to what we think of when we think of GPCR signaling. And lastly, this paper here, effectively what they're saying is bigger is better in virtual library screening. So If you take a library of several 100 million compounds, looking towards billions of compounds in several years' time, this is improved in terms of the diversity and the output of what you get out in terms of efficacy. So a few other things to talk about. Preprints are becoming ever more popular in various other sciences. Physicists have been using these for a long, long time. It's not new to them. Biologists are still, some of them getting to grips with this. Chemists, this is a very new thing. Nature is fully supportive of preprints. We fully engage in that. Nature Communications actually has a trial now. You can submit directly from the preprint, just linked to that exactly. The only thing to say here is if you publish your preprint and it's going to be published open access, we publish open access studies in Nature, genomic studies, things from CERN, big data, that kind of thing. That's fine, you can put the accepted version up. Otherwise, it's 6 months. The question I get asked most about preprints is to do with publicity. So the only thing I should say is, if you put your paper on a preprint and it attracts attention from journalists and they ask you questions about it, that's fine, it's no problem. But we ask that you don't actively engage journalists in your research until it's published. I actually don't know the case yet whether this has actually impacted our decision at all, but this is what our policy is. So. Of course, this leads on to open access and open science more broadly. Obviously, this kind of issue has been accelerated by things like Coalition S, Plan S, and at the moment it's a difficult time for researchers because they don't know where they're sitting a lot of the time between their funder, where they're publishing their work, and what they're going to be able to do in the future. So we are one of the largest open access publishers in general, and to try and help people out with this, we have various resources here. You can either email this address, you can find out. This is all free to use, and you can look at our funder and institutional OA policies so you know where you stand before you submit your research when you're publishing your research, to try and be as helpful as possible. Lastly, I just want to say, I already mentioned Nature's 150 this year. It's a big anniversary for us, so we are doing lots and lots of things to try and tell people about what we're excited about in the future. So not looking back, but looking forward. We're doing lots and lots of things. We've got an anniversary issue in October, November time, but the first thing we're doing is we're having a series of reviews and perspectives published throughout the year that are looking forward to global health and societal challenges in general and big step changes in the field. The first one is this, mobile health diagnostics, from Molly Stevens' group, and many of you may know. And these are all free to read in perpetuity. This one's really good, I recommend you go and read it, and they're all, you can see by this logo, the 150 logo on them. So, with that, I'll just thank you very much for your attention, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, I have one. You mentioned that you worked in research before working in Nature. Did you have publication in Nature?
No. We submitted a paper to Nature in 2012, I think, maybe 2011. It was sent out to review. The reviewers, some liked it, some didn't. It ended up being published in Nature Chemistry. We were very happy about it, to be honest. We chanced it at Nature. Yeah, it went the other way. It was fine about it.